Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 31 of Women's Wrestling Focus, brought to you by SEScoops and hosted by me, Ella J of A Wrestling Gal podcast. And today we are here to talk about all things the brand new Smackdown Women's Champion, Liv Morgan. And if you haven't been tuning into WWE programming this past week, you might not know that Ronda Rousey is no longer the blue brand champion. In fact, Liv Morgan did it all. She captured the Money in the Bank briefcase on Saturday night, and of course, she cashed in that same night later on, which we'll get into all of that. And now, looking forward now, in just 3 weeks is WWE's next big pay-per-view, the biggest event of the summer, SummerSlam. Where will Liv Morgan end up? Who will be her opponent? And what does the future look like now that Liv Morgan is your SmackDown Women's Champion? We'll cover all of that plus more in this edition of Women's Wrestling Focus. Now, this past Saturday on 4th of July weekend, WWE held their annual Money in the Bank pay-per-view with 7 women competing this year to capture the Money in the Bank briefcase. Of course, we had 4 opponents from Raw and 3 opponents from SmackDown in a odd number of 7 this year, but nevertheless, it was definitely very much action-filled. Of course, we saw many ladder spots. We saw Raquel Gonzalez using the ladder kind of as a weight. We saw them using it as a bridge. Of course, there was just so much carnage in this matchup, but leading up to it, of course, we had the go-home show to Raw and the go-home show of SmackDown, and one person emerged victorious above the rest and headed into Money in the Bank with the most momentum possibly I've ever seen heading into a pay-per-view. Of course, Money in the Bank was this past weekend, but the Raw before, Liv Morgan had a match against somebody who she's been recently aligned with in the form of former Raw Women's Champion and former SmackDown Women's Champion. Her accolades go on. I'm talking about Alexa Bliss. Many maybe expected Bliss to go over there. Again, those two have become very friendly lately on WWE programming, but in the end, Liv Morgan pulled off the win and defeated Alexa Bliss. And then a couple days later on SmackDown, obviously there was a trios tag team match with the Battle of the Brands, Raw versus SmackDown. And of course, Liv Morgan now teamed up with Alexa Bliss alongside Asuka as representing Team Raw against Team SmackDown, that being Lacey Evans, Shotzi, and Raquel Rodriguez. And again, Liv Morgan picked up the pin victory over Shotzi and earned the win for her team. So Liv Morgan headed into Money in the Bank with a heap load of momentum, which again is something we don't see too often heading into Money in the Bank, at least from what I can recall. Most of the time, WWE likes to throw us a curveball, and the person winning the go-home shows or heading into the pay-per-view with momentum doesn't normally win the whole thing. The last time I can remember that happening, I believe, was Randy Orton when he won it in, I want to say 2013 or 2014. Whenever he won Money in the Bank, I remember him winning the week of the show before, and then people saying, oh, he's going to lose then because WWE likes to throw us that curveball that the person winning on their go-home shows of Raw and SmackDown doesn't end up winning the match. But that year, Randy Orton did, and I really think that's the only time since then that I can recall. But if I'm wrong, please let me know down in the comments below. But honestly, that's the last time I can remember that a competitor headed into Money in the Bank with so much momentum and actually went on to win the entire thing. Now, that match was definitely one close call several times. There was a lot of scary spots in that match. The ladder was twisted at one point. Again, heading into this, I personally had maybe Lacey Evans or a Becky Lynch winning. I know a lot of people were looking forward and rooting for Liv Morgan to win, but for some reason, just that WWE standard of the winners traditionally not having the momentum heading in just really, I think, deterred me a little bit and lost my faith a little bit. But I was so happy to see in the end, obviously, it was big time Beck standing atop the ladder, the giant one, I should say. And then Liv Morgan comes in and brings a ladder of her own and climbs up to the top, tries to beat down Becky Lynch. Becky Lynch ultimately pushes her away, but Liv holds on to the ladder and uses her foot as leverage against the top ring rope to catapult herself back towards Becky Lynch and beat her down, and then ultimately climbing to the ladder of victory and literally, to capture the Money in the Bank briefcase and become your 2022 Women's Money in the Bank winner. And the crowd of Las Vegas was absolutely electric. I myself was very emotional, as we discussed on the Money in the Bank post show with Steve Fall, which you would have also seen here on SE Scoop, so don't forget to check that out. I was very emotional. My Twitter timeline was very emotional. All the Liv Morgan fans finally got a little taste, got a little glimmer of hope that Liv Morgan could possibly capture her first championship in WWE. She finally did it after 8 years of being in the WWE, which actually to the day she got the call to be offered a contract for WWE was the same day she won Money in the Bank and then went on to win the SmackDown Women's Championship July 2nd, 2014 to July 2nd, 2022. What a journey Liv Morgan has had. Of course, like I said, Liv Morgan's night didn't stop there. Of course, we also had the SmackDown Women's Championship on the line with Ronda Rousey, Rowdy Ronda Rousey, defending against Natalya. And of course, both competitors brought out the best in each other. We had the battle of the sharpshooter versus the armbar. In the end, it was a victory for Ronda Rousey, but she was down one leg. She was hobbling around the ring a bit. I mean, I would be too if I was put in the sharpshooter a few times. To be fair, that's kind of the point, to target the leg, and Natalya definitely did wear Ronda Rousey down. However, as Ronda Rousey struggled to stand, Liv Morgan's music hits. And of course, Michael Cole and Pat McAfee and the crowd went wild as we realized what was happening. Liv Morgan was cashing in her Money in the Bank briefcase, and just the electricity of the crowd at realizing, oh my gosh, is Liv Morgan about to do it? Is she really about to become champ? And also beat Ronda Rousey, who is arguably one of the best women's superstars in WWE history. I mean, Ronda Rousey was in the top 10 of WWE's 50 greatest women's superstars list that came out last year. So she obviously holds some substantial success. And of course, she did come in defeating Charlotte Flair back in May and now defeating Natalya. So, of course, Ronda Rousey was down, but she wasn't quite out just yet. There was a bit of a scare. As Liv Morgan cashed in her Money in the Bank briefcase, Ronda Rousey went right for Liv Morgan's ankle, applying the ankle lock not once, but twice. Liv managed to fight out of it once before Ronda Rousey reapplied it right away. But in the end, Liv Morgan was able to kick her way out of the ankle lock and taking down the already weakened leg of Ronda Rousey, and ultimately reversed her momentum to put Ronda Rousey in a pin for the 1-2-3 victory. And the energy in the air that night was just so magical. I myself got very emotional. I know Liv Morgan, heading into Money in the Bank, before she even won it, in her entrance, she was very much emotional, as you could see tears forming a little bit, perhaps for foreshadowing to come, as she knew she was winning. But that was such an emotional moment for so many of us, so many Liv Morgan fans. And now Liv Morgan is the brand new SmackDown Women's Champion. And now she came into Money in the Bank never holding a single championship in WWE, period. Not in NXT and not on the main roster. This is her first piece of gold in WWE. And of course, that being the SmackDown Women's Championship. Of course, things maybe got a little complicated since she is, or I should say was, a Raw superstar. We have now just learned that officially Liv Morgan has been moved to the SmackDown brand. Again, she was formerly on the Raw roster. She's faced the likes of Becky Lynch, obviously Bianca Belair. She's faced Doudrop and all of her Raw opponents. But now as the SmackDown Women's Champion, it makes sense. She is now officially moved to the SmackDown brand. But before she officially makes her SmackDown brand move tonight on Friday Night SmackDown, we did see her team up on Monday Night Raw with the Raw Women's Champion Bianca Belair, who also was victorious at Money in the Bank, successfully defending her championship against Carmella. And so it only made sense that the challengers for the championships at Money in the Bank faced the champions. So we had Liv Morgan and Bianca Belair facing Carmella and Natalya. Now, Natalya, Now, Natalya is a SmackDown superstar, so could possibly be seeing another confrontation between Natalya and Liv Morgan tonight on SmackDown. Things are still to be unseen. I think this is Liv Morgan's real official first homecoming on the home brand of which the title she won is represented on. So tonight on SmackDown, I feel like we'll have more information. I don't know how long Ronda Rousey's going to be in the title picture, but one would assume that she could be getting a championship rematch. Of course, when Liv Morgan cashed in her Money in the Bank, there was that amazing moment after the match ended where Ronda Rousey had lost, but she still showed many signs of respect for Liv Morgan, embracing her and handing over the championship to her. So that was a cool moment, but how cool will Ronda Rousey be on SmackDown? Again, we don't really know who Liv Morgan's next challenger, or I should say first challenger, will be. One would think that it might be Ronda Rousey, but SmackDown is now looming 3 weeks away only. Maybe it could be Ronda Rousey. Maybe it could be somebody else. I don't know. I obviously will get more information tonight on SmackDown, maybe with some indication in what the direction is going to look like for Liv Morgan going into SummerSlam, and hopefully in this next reign, hopefully it's a long reign for her. Hopefully she makes it to at least Survivor Series so we can get her versus Bianca. I know I myself would love that. A lot of the WWE universe would love to see that. We got to see them team up, but we haven't really gotten to see them go one-on-one before. If I'm wrong, please correct me, but I don't think we've seen them go. Maybe we have. I don't think we've seen them go one-on-one before. We've seen them in that triple threat matchup earlier this year with Doudrop, but I don't think we've officially seen them go one-on-one. But please let me know down below when Liv Morgan and Bianca Belair have gone one-on-one, if they have. But like I said, the future of Liv Morgan's SmackDown Women's Championship title reign is kind of up in the air. SmackDown will probably give us a lot of answers. One would assume Ronda Rousey obviously would come out and have something to say and maybe invoke her rematch clause at SummerSlam. We saw Natalya confront her on Monday Night Raw, so maybe Natalya is another viable option. Obviously, there is some fresh competitors on SmackDown for Liv Morgan, like a Raquel Rodriguez, like Xia Li. She's obviously been in competition with Lacey Evans and Shotzi before, so I feel like there's a lot of ways and a lot of avenues that SmackDown could go with this. But I know another possible option is the return of the Queen, Charlotte Flair, who we have not seen since WrestleMania Backlash. Obviously, in real life, she got married, and I'm so happy for her, but I know a lot of people, including myself, are missing the presence of the Queen, Charlotte Flair, and she's undefeated at SummerSlam. I believe she's 5-0, so maybe Charlotte Flair could potentially be in the mix at SummerSlam. She technically never got her rematch from when she lost the SmackDown Women's Championship. She went on her absence right after Ronda won. So maybe it could be a triple threat match. Maybe it's a number one contendership between Ronda Rousey and Charlotte Flair. I don't know. I'm just kind of fantasy booking at this point. I don't know. Obviously, we'll get more answers tonight on SmackDown, but I'm excited to see what the future looks like for Liv Morgan going forward for her reign. Of course, like I said, SummerSlam is a mere 3 weeks away. I myself will be there on behalf of SE Scoops. I'm so excited to see Liv Morgan thrive. I think the right option and the viable option and logical option is to have Ronda Rousey go against her. But again, would WWE have Liv Morgan pin Ronda Rousey again? Personally, I want to see it. However, Ronda Rousey has now been pinned for the second time on two big pay-per-views at WrestleMania and now Money in the Bank. So I could see them wanting to protect Ronda Rousey. Maybe Ronda goes away for a bit and then maybe invokes her rematch clause in a few months. We've obviously seen that before, where champions go away or they don't invoke their rematch clause until maybe months down the line. I can see that being a viable option, but who is going to be Liv Morgan's SummerSlam opponent? Natalya just lost at Money in the Bank. However, Natalya is a very reliable option. For some reason though, I could potentially see a tag team match. Now, hear me out. I feel like if you're going to want to go in and extend Liv Morgan's reign and you have somebody like a Charlotte Flair returning, you obviously don't want Charlotte Flair to lose. You kind of want to protect her. Obviously, she's coming back. You want to build her strong. You also want to protect Ronda Rousey. So maybe, just maybe, we did see that show of respect after Money in the Bank between Liv Morgan and Ronda Rousey. So maybe we get a tag team match with Ronda Rousey teaming with Liv Morgan against two generational superstars, two well-decorated champions in the form of Natalya and a returning queen, Charlotte Flair. I don't think there's any way you have Charlotte Flair miss the pay-per-view that she has the best record at. And that's SummerSlam. Again, she's 5-0 at the pay-per-view. And I think a way to also protect Liv Morgan's reign is to maybe not have her first defense at SummerSlam. Maybe make it even bigger, and you have some of those bigger names on SmackDown, because right now, in the absence of Charlotte Flair, outside of Ronda Rousey, there really was no big name. And obviously with the absence of Sasha Banks and Naomi, which is a whole separate situation, SmackDown was really lacking the depth of the bigger names on the brand. And obviously Liv Morgan is now officially back on SmackDown, and her addition is definitely a breath of fresh air to, I would say, the struggling roster, the unfortunately struggling women's roster on SmackDown. Liv Morgan is the top babyface that you need. Ronda Rousey was obviously pushed as the top babyface, but outside of Ronda, there really was no, I would say, top babyface. Lacey Evans just came back. They're pushing her as a babyface. Raquel just got called up a few months ago, but really a consistent and a really proven babyface has been Liv Morgan. Now, you also, again, to have a top babyface, top two babyfaces, I would say, you also have to have their counterpart, which is the top heels, which I would say would be a Shayna Baszler and a Natalya. Now, we obviously saw Natalya go against Ronda Rousey at Money in the Bank. They're two former friends. Obviously, I think it'd be cool to have Shayna Baszler in the mix. I know a lot of people personally want to see a Shayna and Ronda rivalry, obviously, as, again, another four horsewoman. And obviously, they're friends. They're both fellow MMA competitors. I know that would be a compelling matchup, but also, realistically, I feel like Charlotte Flair, booking-wise, has been pushed to be a bigger star in the eyes of WWE. And so I think with the addition of Liv Morgan, I also think the return of Charlotte Flair will rejuvenate the SmackDown women's division. Obviously, Charlotte Flair coming back as heel. I think a smart decision might be a tag team match, to be honest with you. Maybe Charlotte Flair suffers her first loss at SummerSlam. Or maybe even if Charlotte Flair, again, in my theory, if her and Natalya do pick up the victory, it still protects Liv Morgan because she's not losing the championship. The championship is not on the line, in my theory. And maybe that sets up some dissension between Ronda Rousey maybe finally turning heel against Liv Morgan. I don't know. I feel like if you were to continue to extend Charlotte Flair's streak, it will not be at the expense of Liv Morgan's championship, at least not at SummerSlam. So I think that's a way to safely book it. It protects Liv Morgan. Even if she loses, she still holds on to the championship past SummerSlam. And it also brings Charlotte Flair back into contention again. And I think really, it complicates things, but it also makes things a little bit spicier because, again, Charlotte Flair never received her rematch, and Ronda Rousey hasn't either. So those two could maybe be duking it out for who gets a rematch first, or I could just be completely wrong and it's Ronda Rousey versus Liv Morgan at SummerSlam. However, I think the more compelling and safer option is to have that tag team matchup. Maybe if you want to extend Charlotte Flair's streak, keep it undefeated to 6-0. It protects Liv Morgan, and maybe she doesn't even have to be the one to take the pin. Maybe Ronda Rousey takes the pin again. I don't know, but I think it protects Liv Morgan and also extends Charlotte Flair's winning streak. And Liv holds on to the championship, and she's champion beyond it being 4 weeks. So to me, that's how I would book it personally. However, Ronda Rousey could easily invoke her rematch clause, and it would still, again, be the logical option. She just lost the championship. But I don't think it's going to be that simple knowing WWE, but we'll see what happens. I hope Liv Morgan, again, like I said, I really want to see her go to at least, at the very least, Survivor Series. I think her versus Bianca Belair would be a phenomenal matchup. I know they're two of the biggest faces in WWE, two of the crowd favorites. I think that would be a very fun matchup between her. We got to see them tag team, but I think them versus each other would be very compelling at Survivor Series. But again, assuming that this tag team match, like I said, happens, who would be her competitor next? I don't know. I think obviously she has to face Ronda Rousey first, or maybe Charlotte and Ronda aren't done and Liv Morgan is preoccupied with somebody else. I could also see that happening. There's obviously still some unfinished business between Charlotte and Ronda. That could preoccupy a secondary storyline for the women on SmackDown, where Liv Morgan then is in a program with somebody else, maybe like a Shayna Baszler, who again, like I said, is I think in the top 3 heels on the SmackDown women's division, assuming Charlotte returns. It would be Charlotte, Natalya, and Shayna, I would say, is the top heels in the women's division. Maybe Liv assumes a feud maybe with Natalya then. I don't know. I think that would be obviously very entertaining. I could see her going against like maybe a Shotzi or maybe a Shayna. I think there's many avenues you could go. I personally don't think that we're going to get Ronda and Liv right away. But there is also another possibility to SmackDown. If it's not Charlotte Flair, it could be a Grand Slam women's champion. It could be Bayley. We have not seen Bayley since last summer, since she injured her knee. Obviously, she seems to be back or almost back. We've seen her training and sharing training videos, and she seems to be doing well with her knee. I think Bayley, if it's not Charlotte Flair, would be, again, a phenomenal addition to SmackDown. Obviously, assuming she returns as a heel, which I feel like SmackDown is lacking a top heel besides Natalya right now in the absence of Charlotte. So Bayley would be a phenomenal option. She was on such a hot streak as one of the top heels in the company before she unfortunately got injured, and I think having her return to SmackDown is much needed. SmackDown needs a top women's heel on SmackDown. They really do. And so whether it's Charlotte or whether it's Bayley, maybe again Bayley would be that fourth competitor in this tag team matchup that I'm talking about. I think we absolutely need a Bayley or Charlotte return before SummerSlam coming up in 3 weeks. And again, hopefully we'll find out tonight. Hopefully somebody returns tonight on SmackDown. There's a lot of avenues, but we'll see what happens. I'm excited for Liv Morgan. Like I said, I have high hopes for this reign, and I hope it's not one of those reigns that only lasts a couple weeks. Liv Morgan has worked her butt off for 8 years in WWE consistently. She has so much support behind her, and the dream has finally come true. And I don't want this dream to end anytime soon. She has so much support surrounding her, and I know she's going to be a wonderful addition to the SmackDown women's division. Like I said, she is going to breathe. She's really going to be a breath of fresh air on the SmackDown women's division. Again, as they've been lacking some stars due to injuries, hiatuses, other scenarios going on with Sasha and Naomi. And so Liv Morgan is now officially back on SmackDown. She is your SmackDown Women's Champion. Of course, I could be completely wrong, but let me know down below, in the comments down below, who do you think is going to be Liv Morgan's first challenger for the SmackDown Women's Championship? Do you think it's going to be the logical option in being Ronda Rousey? I mean, Ronda just got pinned. She could easily invoke her rematch clause. Or do you think Ronda Rousey is going to be preoccupied maybe with a returning Charlotte Flair or a Bayley or maybe somebody else? What do you think Liv Morgan's involvement is going to be at SummerSlam? Hopefully we get some answers here tonight on SmackDown. But in the meantime, Let me know down in the comments below. And of course, thank you so much for joining me today. This episode was so much fun to film. Again, I am so happy and emotional for Liv Morgan for finally winning some gold in WWE. She absolutely deserves it. She's been killing it in the game. Obviously, she's been doing some acting now in movies and maybe even a television show. So Liv Morgan's stock is definitely on the rise, and hopefully it doesn't fall too soon. Praying for good booking for her. She absolutely deserves it. But for episode 31 of Women's Wrestling Focus, this has been Ella J. Of course, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to SEScoopup so you can be first informed on all our exclusive content, including in a couple weeks. Like I said, we were talking about SummerSlam. I will be there on behalf of SEScoopup in Nashville, Tennessee for StarCast and, of course, for SummerSlam itself. I am so much looking forward to the event, all the events that are going to unfold that weekend, including, hopefully, a cool Liv Morgan match. But we'll see what happens. Nothing has officially been announced yet at the time of recording this. So, for episode 31, this is Ella J. signing off.